Ellison, you've got orders for Munich. So they signed the Jeep over to me. I got on the Autobahn, drove to Munich, checked in with I think it was the 325th Communications Battalion, which was operating 3rd Army rear. There was rear and forward. Rear handled all of the prisons and supplies, and forward handled all of the administrative and intelligence and stuff. So they said, here are your orders for Nuremberg. And I said, I just came from that area. And so I got on the Autobahn, drove back to Nuremberg, turned in the Jeep at the motor pool, signed in, got my Palace of Justice pass, and here I was working at the Nuremberg war trials with now fairly modern communications by then. 2 trailers, one had the frames and the other had the switchboards, and they were back to back. And our switchboards then were kind of modern. We had still drop boards and ring for the long distance communication lines. We had a line to Paris, Zurich, Switzerland, Moscow, and London, direct lines, and then telephone lines in the Palace, Palace of Justice. So here I am, and now this is December of '45. I remember that because the Americans were going to have a party someplace, and all of my buddies said, we want to go to the party. He says, fine, I am not a partier. So I went and I'll take care of the switchboards. I handled the switchboard all night. I think it was Christmas Eve. And I did the same New Year's Eve. And I had a line, and I talked to I guess she was a Wren in London, 100 feet below ground. I must talk several hours. We just chatted on the telephone, nothing else going on. Yeah. Our quarters were over the administrative section in Palace of Justice. Our window, we had, I guess we had cots by then, GI mess, they brought in a mess, and our windows overlooked the prison walls where the Germans were being held.
Did you actually see the courtyard? Could you actually see them exercise?
I didn't see them exercise, but we could. I don't know that we were looking at the right time, but we could see the courtyard. Okay. But we saw the barred walls, windows of the barred walls. So we had with our pass, Palace of Justice pass, we'd go in and listen to the testimony. I didn't do that but one day, and that day was, I had off that day, and I said, I'll go see what's happening. So I went in and sat down in the balcony, and it was a French woman who had survived the concentration camp, and she was talking about, I think it was probably a French concentration camp, talking about the feeling of the people in the area around the concentration camp, seeing trains bringing people in and leaving empty, having strange odors all day long coming out of the ovens, not knowing what was happening, not daring to go near the concentration camps. And so that was kind of, her testimony was about those activities, and I don't remember what camp she was in.
And it was during the time of the French prosecution, so you're probably listening with the headset.
American translation.
English. It probably was all in French.
Yes, it was in French.
And the prosecutor was a guy named Dubost, D-U-B-O-S-T. And I'll read a little bit of this, because this may put into perspective. Much of Dubois' evidence came from the German concentration camps, understood at the time as the quintessential instrument of the Nazi domination of Europe. Breaking with American strategy, the French determined to make the case at this point through witnesses. Dubois called 7 victims of concentration camps. 3 of them described Mauthausen in Austria, where many Allied prisoners of war were taken to be murdered. 2 told of Buchenwald, including accounts of so-called medical experience, and perhaps the most powerful testimony began on January 28th when Dubois called to stand an articulate woman in a dark blue suit, age 33, Marie-Claude Vaillant-Courturier, who was a veteran of the French resistance who survived more than 3 years of Nazi tortures and abuse, mainly in Auschwitz.
A French Auschwitz survivor is here to testify. A communist She was deported for acts of resistance.
Êtes-vous témoin direct
Oui.
de la sélection à l'arrivée des convois?
Oui, parce que quand nous avons travaillé au bloc de la couture en 1944, notre bloc, le bloc où nous habitions, était en face de l'arrivée du train. On avait perfectionné le système. Au lieu de faire la sélection à la halte d'arrivée, une voie de garage menait le train presque jusqu'à la chambre à gaz. Et l'arrêt, c'est-à-dire à 100 mètres de la chambre à gaz, était juste devant notre bloc, mais naturellement séparé par 2 rangées de fils de fer barbelés. Nous voyions donc les wagons déplombés, les soldats sortir, les hommes, les femmes et les enfants des wagons, et on assistait aux scènes déchirantes des vieux couples se séparant, des mères étant obligées d'abandonner leurs jeunes filles puisqu'elles entraient dans le camp, tandis que les mères et les enfants étaient dirigés vers la chambre à gaz. Tous ces gens-là ignoraient le sort qui leur était réservé. Ils étaient seulement désemparés parce qu'on les séparait les uns des autres, mais ils ignoraient qu'ils allaient à la mort. Une nuit, nous avons été réveillés par des cris effroyables. Nous avons appris le lendemain matin par les hommes qui travaillaient au Sonderkommando, le commando des gaz, que la veille, n'ayant pas assez de gaz, ils avaient jeté les enfants vivants dans les fournaises.
A witness of great stature, she was a deputy in the French Constituent Assembly. Vaillant-Courturier poured out a cascade of horrors unfamiliar to the immediate post-war audience. She told of the torture and the murder of the resistance members, the unspeakable convoy to Auschwitz, the terrible regimen of the camp, the gassing of Jews, the sickness, and the medical experiments. As you were listening to some of this testimony, what was your gut reaction? You're probably hearing things for the very first time.
Yeah, I was hearing things for the very first time and realizing that the things we'd heard, I guess I would say, about the Nazi machine, it really happened. I didn't have any belief but what it did happen, but I didn't realize the depth of it. And it wasn't until afterwards, since I was in the occupation force on into 46, I began to see how deeply it had permeated the German civilization and the society. I can talk more about that in the occupation end of it, but it began to be really, it was evident to me that the Allied forces, I guess is the way to put it, had every right to call these people to trial because they had in fact murdered millions of people, and it was, what should I say? It was something that they should be called to account for, and it just wasn't one individual. It was the whole Nazi structure involving all facets of life that had done this thing. So it was a total movement of the youth and the younger Germans. The older Germans, I think the ones 40s, 50s, and 60s, became powerless to do anything. And it was sad because I think they recognized what had happened to their country. But they were powerless by the time the brown shirts and the Nazis got into control. They were powerless to do anything and were going to be killed if they put up any resistance. So the grandfathers and the older people just had to.
Was there a sense of revulsion? Could you, for example, you're in the gallery and at the same time you have a wonderful view of the 21 defendants.
Yeah.
And so this is probably the first time your eyes are
watching them
and you see Hermann Goering. What's your reaction?
Well, I think they were they were all, how should I say, so accustomed to what they'd been doing that they'd heard all of this before, and it was just a matter of time before maybe they'd be put to death. And so it was kind of a so what, as far as their reaction to go, or they weren't arguing, or they were not allowed to speak, and you know, to say that wasn't true. So I just kind of got the feeling that it was a done deal, but we had to make it public for the world to know, and properly to, or should I say, prosecute them for what they had done. But they didn't seem to be bothered by it. They just sat there and were doing their own thing.
Do any of those characters jump out at you as you close your eyes now and you think of Goering or Hess or anybody that said, my gosh, now I see what this guy looks like, having read about him? Because this probably was your first experience to see them.
My first time seeing them. I had not seen them in any of their rallies. I hadn't been around the rallies or anything. I guess the things I'd heard about them, yeah, the pictures, few pictures we'd seen, they were in fact the average individuals as far as their looks go, and but I didn't have anything except what I heard was powerful enough. I decided I wouldn't eat lunch that day, and having heard it once, I figured if I went back some more, all I would continue to hear was the same thing. So I don't think I went back any other times to sit in the gallery to what was happening, to listen to it.
You weren't alone.
There were also executions.
This is the postscript
The
of
numbers were
her
all
testimony
in the
that
morning,
day.
and the victims then left for the Kommandantur
And
were
it
never
was,
seen again.
as it was
A few
done,
days
they
later,
describe it, the
the
New
clothes
York
were
Herald
sent
Tribune
down to
described it, the
affected
courtroom was
were the
hushed
clothes of the
at
interested.
Vaillant-Courtierier's
After a
testimony.
certain time,
For
the
some,
crowd
it was
vanished from the
simply
filing
too
cabinets in the
much.
camp.
The Tribune went on to say that on hearing about the atrocities, some of the defendants removed their headphones and they failed to listen to any
No.
more. This
In
was sort of
Auschwitz,
their highlight.
obviously,
So
extermination
sounds like you
was
had
the
probably
same thing.
an experience similar.
Nobody was at all
Similar.
interested in the
Yeah.
work output.
Dismay and the horror of the people living around the area when
It was
you
sufficient
could
to
smell
stand
the
from morning
ovens
till evening,
burning day
but
and
whether we
night,
carried one brick or 10 was of no
and to
importance at
see
all.
the cars coming into a dead-end track end filled with people and leaving empty. There wasn't any way that could be hidden. And I just imagine the community around wondered when it was going to stop.
She was referred to as the most dramatic witness during the French prosecution. In fact, during the course of her testimony, again, you may not have been there for the whole thing, but she described the process of selecting those who were sent to the gas chambers and the medical experiments performed on inmates. In both activities, the name of Dr. Joseph Mengele appeared in the trial record for the very first time. So you probably didn't know it at the time, but you were there when the name Dr. Mengele shows up, the angel of death, as they refer to him. So yeah, you were there at a pretty interesting day in the history of the Nuremberg trials.
Generally speaking, of a convoy of about 1,000 to 1,500, seldom more than 250, and this figure really was the maximum, actually reached the camp. The rest were immediately sent to the gas chamber. At this selection, they also picked out women in good health between the ages of 20 and 30 who were sent to the experimental block, and young girls and slightly older women, or those who had not been selected for that purpose, were sent to the camp where, like ourselves, they were tattooed and shaved. In the spring of 1944, there was also a special block for twins. That was during the time when large convoys of Hungarian Jews arrived, about 700,000. Dr. Mengele, who was carrying out the experiments, kept back from each convoy twin children and twins in general, regardless of their age, so long as both were present. So we had both babies and adults on the floor at that block. Apart from blood tests and measuring, I do not know what was done to them.
Are you a direct witness of the selection when the convoys arrived?
Yes.
As you say, it was a powerful day, and she wasn't afraid to speak up.
As it turned out, she was perhaps one of the most powerful eyewitnesses of the whole trial, and you were there, as Edward R. Murrow would say.